Well, good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. As always, we have a great webinar on tap, but before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will have the opportunity to access it later on. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's presentation you have a question for either one of our speakers, please don't wait, don't hesitate. Just use the questions tab on the GoToWebinar control panel and submit your questions. And we'll try to get to as many as we can near the end of today's webinar. And we are doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So please stick around. Hopefully you'll be one of our 4 lucky winners. All right, with that, let's go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is best practices for developers to master security. Our speakers today are Shiri Arad, who is Director of Product at WhiteSource, and Anna Rozin, who is Director of R&D at WhiteSource. They have a great webinar on tap, and I'm anxious to get started, so I'm going to take myself off camera and put myself on mute and let Shiri and Anna get right to it.
Great. Thanks for the introduction. So yeah, my name is Shiri Arad Ivtsan. I'm the Director of Product in WhiteSource, and we also have Anna. Hi, Anna.
Hi, Shiri. So I'm Anna Rozin. I'm Director of R&D, and I'm also working in WhiteSource.
Yeah, so it's really great to do this webinar together. I think it's a great opportunity to share with everyone sort of the process that we went through in WhiteSource and how we implemented the entire DevSecOps approach. Great.
Yeah. So
moving to the first slide, the idea is really to move from DevOps to DevSecOps. So we really took the main steps of planning, coding, building, testing, and releasing that we already have in the DevOps approach, and we started to incorporate the security aspects into these routines that we have. So when we were planning, we thought, how can we also implement security as part of that? And this is the process that we will share with you today.
Yeah, and well, basically, if I can add here, it's being held all over the place from the initial step of searching the open source component till the development, then on the CI/CD. So we really see it everywhere, all over the place, and we actually need to track it all over the place. And it leads us to the next slide of traditional way of handling the security issues.
Yeah, and this was actually the way that we were handling the security issues in WhiteSource. We have a security team. They were analyzing, they were reviewing and prioritizing the vulnerabilities. And then they actually needed the developers to fix them. So they would send emails or open tickets for the developers. In our example, we used Jira, so they used to open Jira tickets. And then the developers have to fix the issues. But the security don't own the priority of the developers. We have, of course, other priorities as product managers. We can all know that there are a lot of different things that we want the developers to do. And it's not only to handle security vulnerabilities. So really the closing the loop on the resolution, whether or not a specific vulnerability was fixed. Also, sometimes it's not that easy to fix them because maybe there is no available fix, or maybe the latest version actually breaks something else in the code. So for the security teams to understand what was actually handled and what not was very problematic.
Yeah, and I also think that, well, since ever the developers were the one who fixed the vulnerabilities, but now when they are kind of involved in the process and working together with the product and prioritizing the vulnerabilities and the ones that we would like to handle first, and they're the one who actually to point to those vulnerabilities that we actually have them. I think that they feel more comfortable on working on fixing those and not just getting a list from the security person and okay, I need to handle this and that. They actually own it. So
Yeah, they are a lot more involved in the process. And this is why, in terms of they have the awareness and it makes them feel, part of this process. It's not only
yeah,
the security team's problem, it's also like my problem as the product manager of that team and also the developers, the R&D problem.
yeah. So I think that we can elaborate more on our solution and
Yeah. So our
yeah,
solution was to integrate the DevOps and the security culture, like how to integrate between those two teams. As we already mentioned, and Anna pointed out we tried to integrate the security aspects and the security practices with the existing DevOps processes that we already have in the organization. Um, we use agile methodologies. So in general, in WhiteSource, most teams work in agile or Scrum, and we try to deliver in small iterative sprints, and we release a version every 2 weeks. But yet we actually deploy to development and staging a lot more frequently than that. And we make sure that everything, of course, is secure when we deploy it. We try to automate the security processes whenever it's possible. So of course, it's not always possible, and we still have some manual things that we need to go through. But when it's possible, we incorporate the automation as much as we can. And we really believe that the best response to the bottleneck effect that we saw in the previous slide, like where we have one team responsible for security, is to implement those modern continuous delivery pipeline and incorporate the security aspect in that.
yeah. So I also think that when it becomes a problem of all the company and everybody aware about it, even if it's from product perspective or the R&D perspective or some other team, we basically added to each and every step. So the product asks us if we have vulnerabilities and track them in WhiteSource. We actually integrated from the IDE to the Jenkins build and also while searching for dependencies. So it's all over the place, and I think it became already part of the day-to-day routine. And basically, I think that now we can talk a bit more on how we implemented it in WhiteSource and not just talking it out loud.
Yeah. So when it comes to the implementation, first of all, of course, we had to identify the different processes that we need to go through. So the very basic one, I think, is the detection. I mean, knowing that we have this specific number of vulnerabilities. And it sounds easy, but it's not very easy to do. We will understand the complexity in a few slides. Then we need to prioritize them. We need to make sure that we handle the things that are important first. And this is, of course, very problematic because we know that in an average application, there can be tens or even hundreds of open source vulnerabilities. So we definitely need to choose. I mean, we do it every day in our life, but we need to prioritize and choose what they are going to focus on first. And we have a few methods to do that. Then we need to inform, right? Of course, Anna doesn't handle the vulnerabilities herself, at least not all of them. So we need to inform the developers that there is an issue and they need to tackle. So we do it using various systems in the IDE, in the pipeline, and also as part of Jira. Then the developers actually remediate the vulnerabilities, either manually, they just see the top fix and they upgrade the version, but we can also have automated pull requests. And I think that the most advanced part maybe is the prevention. I mean, how can I make sure that in the next time I won't have a security vulnerability that is part of my code? So I think, Anna, you can elaborate a little more on that.
Yes, so even before elaborating on that and moving to the next subject, I would like to mention that In my team, we basically using some other tool that it doesn't fix vulnerabilities, but it helps us to have the latest version and most upgraded version of the dependency that we are using. And I think it's kind of a prevention because when you keep your dependencies updated, it basically helps you to prevent some of the vulnerabilities because in most cases, fixing a vulnerability would be either upgrading a version or replacing the component. And if I'll go and share my screen on some demo on Renovate, so this is my Vol demo project and it's Maven project. And we see here that I have 5 dependencies that I'm using in my project, but I can also see some pull requests that I have for this repo. These are not pull requests that somebody from my team did. It basically Renovate project pull request. And I can see here, for example, for this common collection component that Renovate suggests me to upgrade from version 3.2.1 to 3.2.2. And this upgrade basically will keep me up to date or the most updated that I can be since this component is already 5 years old and the rate adoption is 78%. So I can be sure in this pull request and there is some high confidence on that component. So basically, I think that when we talk about the detection, the prioritize, and all other steps, the most important thing is to keep up to date with all our dependencies. And in some cases, I think in many cases, it will prevent the vulnerability even before it pop up in our projects. And
Exactly. And the merge confidence actually helps us because we know that some of the developers are a little hesitant to merge pull requests that they didn't open or just to upgrade a version. It can break things. So having this high confidence actually helps us to be more sure that this is a safe update and we can go ahead and merge it.
yes, so to the next topic about the implementation, I think that you can explain a bit more, Shiri.
Yeah, so the idea is really to bake the security into the existing workflows. So whether if your developers are, using a specific IDE or a specific repository or SCM like GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, we actually need to make sure that the tool that we choose in order to handle the vulnerabilities and the SCA tool that we actually choose can be part of these day-to-day workflows. So in our example, it's basically we're using some IDEs. We're using mostly GitHub as SCM, and we use Jenkins in most departments for the CI/CD. So we, of course, are using WhiteSource, and we use WhiteSource tools to actually incorporate the security in these specific tools.
Yeah, and I think that one topic that we should mention is the transitive dependencies. Since it's always become an issue, we doesn't really bring them on our own to our code. We just get them from some other open source dependency that we mentioned in our BOM file, the pom.xml or the package.json or any other package manager that we are using in our code. And it's really hard to say what is the best way to deal with those, but in some cases we can upgrade the parent dependency that we declared and it will also upgrade the transitive one, but in others there is no fix and maybe we need to bring the dependency on our own or replace the component. So it's really tough issue that many developers handle with, and it always become a conversation. Oh, how I'm going to fix that, and what is the best way to deal with that? And I think, well, speaking about dealing, so we can talk a bit about the IDE plugin.
Yeah, so the transitive thing just adds an additional complexity to something that, it may sound easier. Okay, so I'll just keep my versions up to date. Every time that I find a vulnerability, I will fix it, but it's actually not that easy when you have those transitive dependencies. But moving to the next subject, so the very first and sort of early stage is the IDE plugin, where WhiteSource actually highlights the security aspects to the developer. And the goal here is both to raise their awareness. I mean, right in the IDE, they can see that they have vulnerabilities, and they can already go ahead and fix them, and also without switching their context to another screen. And this, when we developed the entire WhiteSource for developers product or suite, we try to make sure that first of all, we give only actionable tools to the developers. We don't bombard them with a lot of information, but second, we make sure that we give it in their own existing tools. We don't need them to go and switch to another screen and run a report. They will see everything where they actually work in their day-to-day job. So
Yeah.
maybe we can see a short demo of that.
Yes, so I think that even before showing the demo, we can mention that actually the idea to create this tool came actually from one of our developers. So it's really great to get those ideas from the developers themselves. And as we can see here, we see our demo project that we saw before with Renovate, and we see all those dependencies. And if we go back to this common collection, as we saw before, and it was suggested to upgrade to 3.2.2. And if I'll take a look here, I can see that this dependency got a vulnerability. And there is a suggested fix, which is upgrading to the same version of 3.2.2 that was mentioned by Renovate. And if I'll change this now, we basically rescan now this POM file, and we will see that in few seconds, this vulnerability will disappear. And if we would have listened or keep our dependencies upgraded as much as possible, we might have even eliminated those and we wouldn't know about them because we keep our dependencies up to date. So it is a good practice overall, but still, if we miss that in one place, there is another place that we can basically handle it. And of course, it is better to handle it as soon as possible.
Yeah, and it also gives you that quick feedback. I mean, at the moment that you change it, it just rescans everything and tells you, okay, you eliminated the vulnerability. So it's also good for the developers to know that, okay, now I am clear. They will go ahead and fix each and every one of the dependencies, and then they can go ahead and continue to the next step without worrying about security vulnerabilities, at least for now, because we know these new security vulnerabilities are being published every day.
Yeah, and I think that a good way to handle this is to define some policies in our organization and maybe try to handle it in some other way. So I think, sure, that you have few things to say about those.
Yeah. So an organizational policy is really your place to think and maybe incorporate also the security teams and think together about what is acceptable and what is not acceptable in your organization. So in this example, we have a few just examples. It's not a best practice or anything, but in this case, we chose to reject high security vulnerability, reject a GPL license, and it's basically up to you, up to your organization. Maybe you need to handle all vulnerabilities, including the low ones. Maybe you only want to handle the high and medium ones, but low, it's okay to stay for now. Specific licenses that you as an organization need to reject or need to accept, you can basically do everything here. And then this will also be part of course, the automation process.
Yes, so talking about automation process basically leads us to WhiteSource UI. And now I'm going just to define a policy as we saw before. And this policy will reject high security vulnerability. And I will add this policy. I will save it. And in order to use this policy, we wanted to automate some of our processes. And we basically run a WhiteSource tool on WhiteSource itself. And in this tool, as we can see in Jenkins job, we clone this vol demo project that we already saw before on the branch named main. And we run the WhiteSource unified agent jar that help us to have the scan with some configuration. And because we have a policy, now I'm going to run a build on this project. And we are going to see that basically there is a policy check against WhiteSource, and would like to have some failure if there is a security vulnerability, and we already saw and know that we have one, at least one. We have more in this project. So there was a performance of check policy, and the update is aborted because some of the dependencies didn't conform with those policies. As we saw, we had a high security vulnerability, and it fails the Jenkins jobs. It exits with failure, so there is no chance I can upload new version or do something before I fix this vulnerability. So I think it's a good way to keep us um, tracking those vulnerabilities. If we miss this on the IDE or in some other place, we still can find those vulnerabilities and handle them as good as we can.
And I also think that again, this is part of like integrating security into the existing processes, because we identify that we already have this Jenkins job that we build, and we already have automated tests like the QA tests, the functional ones. That are there to find bugs. So we just added another test for security, another post-build step to fail for security. And the developers and the QA are already familiar with the fact that sometimes the build fails, so they can accept it more easily.
Yeah, and I think that one important thing that to do when you have a lot of vulnerabilities is to find a way to prioritize them.
Right. So we went over like the main process of, detecting and informing and making sure that we automate the process, but how do we actually prioritize the vulnerabilities? So usually we go based on the very like clear and obvious one, which is the severity. I will probably handle high severity vulnerabilities before handling low ones. The availability of fixes. So sometimes if I already have an existing fix, an existing version that will upgrade to, it's easier to fix. Otherwise, I have to find my own ways maybe. And the business impact, of course, if I have some sort of internal system for some management versus an external database that maybe also holds some data, I will handle the one that holds data before I will handle an internal tool. So it's really based, really important, the business impact. What we also use is WhiteSource Prioritize, which I guess Anna will show us now.
Yeah, so I think that even before showing the demo, prioritization is real big deal and big issue, because the initial step of handling those vulnerabilities, it is not easy because you have a lot of them. And then you need to decide, what do I handle first? And we also have some Jira tickets from product, which are something that need to be get to the customer. So it's always issue of prioritization, and it's not easy. But one of the tools that we are using in WhiteSource is WhiteSource Prioritize. And if I'll go to one of the projects, I can see that in this Prioritize demo project, besides the description and the knowledge that I have vulnerabilities, there are also shields, green and red. Green ones are good at the moment, and the red ones are bad. And what does it mean is that the red ones means that there is actual path to a vulnerable place in the open source component from my code to this component. So I'm vulnerable as well. While the green one says that I'm using a vulnerable component, but I'm not reaching the vulnerable place. So if I had to choose how do I prioritize this situation, I would have eliminate or stop using this version of component, the one that has the red shield. I will try to update a version if there is a fix. If there is no fix and I'm actually using the vulnerable code, I must replace this component immediately, and it's not easy at all. You need to refactor your code. You need to do a lot of changes. And with the green ones, we can leave at the moment, but we must know and keep scan it all the time because it can always be a red shield in the future. Um,
Exactly. So it's a very good way to prioritize. I mean, as we know, developers have a lot of tasks. And if we can really know that they invest their time on the most important things first, we can be more sure that. So let's say that in WhiteSource, for example, one of the things that we do is if we have vulnerabilities in the code, we put them as part of the day-to-day or the overall sprints that we have. It's not something that we do once every quarter or once every half year. It's something that happens all the time because really security is not something that you do one time and then you forget about it. And we do it really an iterative process all the time. And it's very good that we have this prioritization mechanism.
yes, so I think that there is some other tool, and it's basically the remediation that we would like to talk about.
Yeah, so remediation, as you already mentioned in the beginning, like the best way to eliminate risk and to mitigate the risk is to keep the versions up to date. So by doing this, we actually avoid being exploited. And it's not an easy thing to do because of course you need to do it all the time. But if you have the newest version and you patch the version all the time, you're basically secure. So we have those automated remediation workflows that you just showed using Remediate. But we can also have something that opens pull requests only if there is a vulnerability. So we will basically upgrade to a version that doesn't contain any vulnerability. This is just an example project, and we can see that we have WhiteSource integrated in this project, in this repo. So first of all, if I go to the Issues tab, I can see that we highlighted a few security issues that we have in this repository. If I click on one of them, this actually highlights the security aspect to the team. And if we go to the pull request, I can already see that it's open an automated pull request to update the dependency. And if I will upgrade, this is a minor update. If I will change the dependency from version 4.12.0 to version 4.14.0, I will actually eliminate 3 high vulnerabilities. So it's very good to do that, even if I don't have Renovate in place and I'm not up to date all the time, at least open those pull requests for fixes if there is a vulnerability. This is a very important thing to do.
Yeah, I think that also knowing which vulnerabilities I'm going to fix when I'll upgrade this component really helps the developer to understand what will happen after approving this pull request. And I think that a good approach is to have good unit tests so you can be sure in the upgraded version, not only because somebody says to you that it will fix 3 vulnerabilities, but also because you checked it and you know that it's kind of safe for you. And I think it leads us almost to the end of the session.
Yeah,
So
so we do have a few takeaways.
yeah,
First of all, we understand that cultural change is a key to success, right? We need to make sure that security is not only one team's problem. It's actually everyone's problem. The product, the R&D, also the security team, of course, and we need to have a joint effort in order to succeed in this mission. Of course, automation is the main driver, right? We saw the automated policies, the automated pull requests. Again, we try to save time and be as efficient as we can. So we try to automate things that can be automated and that are more basic. We also saw automation as part of the prioritization. Of course, we also have some manual work to do, and always there is either a developer or a team leader that will take all this information and prioritize it. But this gives us very good hints in order to what we need to do first.
Yeah, so I think that the most important key is to involve your developers in the process when they take the responsibility and they feel that it's not the security person issue or the product issue, and it's the team issue. They kind of look for those vulnerabilities by themselves. They want to fix the vulnerabilities. They want to keep their dependencies updated. They want their code to work as good as possible. So all this and having good unit tests, I think that can make all this process work in a good way, without having some conflicts or developers that don't want to fix their vulnerabilities. And I think that basically we finished, and now we'll do the Q&A.
Yeah, so I think we already have some questions. Let's go ahead and answer them.
Okay.
All right, guys. Yes, we do have some questions that have come in. Sorry about that. The video kind of cut out there. But yeah, so plenty of questions that have come in, and let's go ahead and address them. Guys, here's the first one for you. How can I fix transitive dependency in case there is a fix?
So if there is a fix for a transitive dependency, it basically really depends. If the dependency have been upgraded from the direct dependency, which means I can upgrade the direct dependency, and I also will get the upgraded version of the transitive one, it will work for me. But in many cases, it can be done because there is no update on the parent component that I'm actually using in my code. So that really depends on which package manager you are using. For example, in Maven Gradle, it is possible to bring the transitive dependency with the right version on your own. But for example, in NPM, it could be pretty difficult to do that. So sometimes it's possible. In some other cases, we actually need to wait till the parent component will have an upgraded version with the transitive as well.
All right, great. Plenty of time for questions, guys. If you do have a question for Shiri or Anna, please go ahead and use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your questions. Here's another one for you guys. What is the role of the security team if the developers are responsible for security? I'm sure you guys get this one a lot.
Yeah, we do. We actually get it from the actual customers. I mean, I think that the security teams are kind of sometimes reluctant to start the process of, handling DevSecOps because they sort of feel like they are going to be left behind. So I think this is something that is very, very important. And I think that the security teams, and we see it in, successful implementations of WhiteSource, have a very big role in the success of the implementation of DevSecOps. So the security teams are actually the experts, right? Developers are not experts in security. They know how to write code. But definitely, the entire process of reviewing, understanding the vulnerability, researching, investigating, finding mitigation. So sometimes the development will not be able to upgrade the component. Maybe it breaks something, maybe it's a very large effort. We have this a lot. And in this case, the security team will actually have to find a mitigation for the vulnerability. So I think that there is plenty of work for security teams. They're actually getting more busy after implementing DevSecOps. So, but yeah, this is a question that we actually get a lot.
All right, great. Next question, what are the day-to-day processes in WhiteSource in terms of security handling?
Yeah, okay, so I'll take that one. So first is using Renovate to have our components up to date as much as possible. The second thing is use, of course, in the IDE. Then if I'm a developer and apparently there is some vulnerability, I can see it live and actually try to fix it or see if there is a fix, maybe prevent of using this component even before writing a single line of code. And also have automated builds in Jenkins with policies as well, because we would like to fail the build if there is actually a security vulnerability. We would not like to promote this code to production. And I think that basically it's all over the place in the IDE, with renovating GitHub and also in Jenkins and other CI/CDs that we are using.
All right. Great, great. Next question. This demo is based on Maven. Is there any plan to support Gradle together with Kotlin?
Well, basically, Gradle is already supported in the IDE, but also in all other WhiteSource tools, Prioritize, Unified Agents, and many others.
Okay. Okay, here's another one for you. Is there any option to run Renovate bot manually? The result of our last job is not found, and now it's not starting anymore. Before job was executed a couple of times per day.
So regarding this question, I'm not really sure. I know that regarding the not found, we actually have an issue that was solved. So maybe we should just send it after that and see if that works for you.
All right, great, great. Let's see. Got plenty of time for questions. So if you do have a question, go ahead and get it on in. We do have one more here for you. After applying the security process during the DevSecOps cycle, is it recommended to perform pen test on the generated code?
Yeah, so this is actually a very good question. I think that maybe we didn't mention it in the beginning, but application security is not only SCA, right? It's not only managing your open source software. So SCA is just one of the methods that you need to implement when you want to secure your application. There is still SAST, which is static application security, DAST, dynamic application security, and we also have, the network security and pen testing, etc. So this is, I think that it's really important to understand that in this webinar, we dealt with SCA, software composition analysis, which is more of the open source management, but definitely pen testing is not in a less importance than SCA. Yep.
All right, great. Okay, so for those who are asking whether there will be a link to the recording afterwards, yes, there will be. We will be sending out an email after today's webinar that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. So fear not, if you missed any or all of the event, you will have the opportunity to watch it again. All right, guys, I have, let's see, I have another question here, but please go ahead and get your questions on in. Okay, here's one for you. On the WhiteSource page, how do we get rid of old reported items? Some of them were already fixed a year ago, and WhiteSource doesn't want to remove them.
So that's a great question. So actually, we have a few methods of actually removing a vulnerability or an item from WhiteSource. So the first one is we have the concept of alerts, and this is probably what you're referring to as the items that you see. So first of all, you can always ignore an alert. So anything that still appears in WhiteSource, and you can also do it in Vault, etc. The second thing is when you actually resolve a vulnerability and rescan your code, WhiteSource will automatically eliminate the alert. So if there is a new version of that code that when you actually, either you upgraded the version and solved the vulnerability, or you completely remove that library with vulnerability, you can just rescan your code with a unified agent, or if you're scanning with an integration, and this alert will automatically be removed. So these are two ways to handle that.
All right, great. Okay, gosh, that's all the questions that we have so far. I will leave the question and answer tab open to see if we get, oh, wait, hold on. We just got one in. This just in.
Uh,
Where does where does IaaS, interactive application security testing, fit into the static and dynamic security testing, and how can it be measured?
So this is really important. I mean, I didn't touch upon all the types of security testing, but interactive application security testing is definitely a very important one. Where does it fit? So basically, there is a need to implement all of them. It really depends how mature you are in terms of the company and how mature you are in terms of the DevSecOps. But the idea is, again, to implement it as part of your lifecycle and pipeline. How can it be measured? So we get that a lot. I mean, what are the KPIs that I need to check after implementing a security tool? Like, how do I test? How do I make sure that the process is actually working? How do I make sure that I implemented WhiteSource, let's say 3 months ago? How do I know that it was successful? So there are plenty of KPIs, and in WhiteSource you can also see them as part of the dashboard. So these are important performance indicators for, let's say, security teams and also maybe development managers and team leaders to see. So things like, am I getting better or worse in handling security vulnerabilities? So at the beginning, when I implemented WhiteSource in the first place, I had like thousands of vulnerabilities, and I should be seeing that graph going down. So decreasing as I use WhiteSource, because I actually solve more and more vulnerabilities. The second metric is regarding the time that it takes me to handle a specific vulnerability. And this is really about if you're implementing DevOps practices or not. So from the moment that I actually detected a vulnerability in my code, how much time did it take me to resolve it? It can be a day if I push to production every day and I implement this, and maybe I even have an automated pull request to fix it, so it happens really fast. Or maybe it took me a week. In the worst case, it would take me years, and then probably I will be exploited. But yeah, so these KPIs are super important, and I think that once you start with the process, it's important to set goals and see if you reach them.
All right, great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and leave the question and answer page up to see if we get any more questions in, because right now we just reached the end. So if you do have any questions for Shiri or Anna, please go ahead and use the GoToWebinar control panel and get your question in. While we're waiting, another quick reminder, I did mention that today's event is being recorded, and you will be getting an email after the webinar that has a link to access the webinar on demand. The webinar is also going to be on the devops.com website, so you can go look for it there as well. You just go to devops.com/webinars and look in the on-demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. All right, guys, I'm not seeing any more questions come in, so I think we might end up giving folks 15 minutes back in their day. I did mention at the top of the hour we would be doing a drawing for $25 Amazon gift cards. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's see. Okay, our winners today are Don M. Congratulations, Don. Chris J. Congratulations, Chris. Jennifer P. Congratulations, Jennifer. And final winner today is Tara A. Congratulations, Tara. We'll be following up with all 4 of you via email to get your Amazon gift card over to you. So please check your inbox. If you don't see anything in your inbox, please check your spam folder. Let's see, it looks like, yep, that's it for the questions. So I'm going to go ahead and thank everybody who did submit questions. And there were some really good ones. I was very impressed by the type of questions that came in. So that just shows that you guys had a great webinar. So awesome stuff. I do also want to thank Shiri and Anna for giving such a great webinar. As always, you guys knock it out of the park. So I appreciate your time and your expertise in today's webinar. And I also want to thank the audience for joining me today. This is Charlene O'Hanlon signing off a little bit early, give everybody 15 minutes back in your day. So have a great day, everybody, and please stay safe.